High school is tough for most kids, but for Lucas, it feels almost impossible. He's not only the new kid at Jefferson High, but he was born with dwarfism, and he's also on the autism spectrum. From the very first moment he steps into the building, students stare, whisper, and laugh, but none of them realize. This quiet, underestimated boy is about to change the entire school in a way no one expected. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because here, we share powerful life lessons through real and relatable stories. Lucas clutched the straps of his worn-out backpack as he walked through the crowded hallway. Every locker slam echoed in his chest like a drumbeat. His eyes darted to the floor, hoping no one would notice him. But of course, they did. A group of students nearby started snickering. One whispered just loud enough, "Look at him, he's so tiny." Another added, "Careful, don't step on him." Laughter followed, bouncing down the hallway like sharp daggers. Lucas felt his face burn. He wanted to disappear, to shrink even smaller than he already was. The truth was, he had rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times. A brand new start. Maybe, just maybe, this school would be different. But already, he could feel the familiar sting of rejection pressing down on him. As he reached his classroom door, his teacher, Mrs. Daniels, greeted him warmly. "Welcome, Lucas. We're happy to have you here." Her voice was kind, but even kindness couldn't drown out the whispers behind him. Lucas sighed quietly and slid into his seat, determined to keep his head down. But little did he know, this was only the beginning of his hardest challenge yet. By the second week, Lucas was already exhausted. Each day felt like a battle he couldn't win. In math class, he raised his hand timidly. "Mrs. Daniels, I can't see from back here. May I switch seats?" His voice was soft, careful. Before the teacher could even respond, a girl in the front row groaned. "Ugh, why does he get special treatment?" she muttered. Her friends snickered. Mrs. Daniels, unfazed, simply said, "Of course, Lucas. Tina, switch seats with him." But Tina crossed her arms, her face sour. "But I'm sitting with my friends," she protested. The teacher's voice grew firm. "It's not up for discussion. Switch seats, please." As Lucas slid into his new spot, he felt dozens of eyes boring into him. Whispers curled around the classroom like smoke. "Teacher's pet, attention seeker, he thinks he's special." But what no one noticed was the way Lucas's hands trembled as he opened his notebook. He wasn't trying to be special. He just wanted to see. Later that same day, Mrs. Daniels introduced probability. She filled the board with numbers, fractions, and symbols. Most students groaned, tapping their pencils impatiently. Lucas's head tilted, trying to process, but the noise, the giggles, and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead blurred his focus. He tapped his pencil 3 times on the desk, a small stim that calmed his nerves. Then, carefully, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a deck of old playing cards. He whispered to the boy next to him, "Here, look, 52 cards in a deck. Half are red. That's 26. If you draw one, it's 26 out of 52. Then one less, 25 out of 51. That's probability." The boy blinked, surprised. "Wait, that actually makes sense." For a brief moment, Lucas felt hope. But before he could explain further, another student shouted, "Hey, he's playing cards in class." The room erupted with laughter. Mrs. Daniels frowned. "Lucas, put those away. No games in class." Lucas's heart sank. He hadn't been playing. He had been teaching. For the first time, the numbers finally made sense to someone. But nobody cared. Instead, all they saw was the weird kid with cards. And so, once again, Lucas shrank into silence. By the time Lucas got home that afternoon, his smile was gone. He dropped his backpack by the door and trudged into the kitchen where his adoptive mom was setting the table. She looked up immediately. "Rough day again?" Lucas tried to shrug it off. "It's nothing." But his voice cracked, betraying the truth. His mom pulled out a chair, motioning for him to sit. "Lucas, I know that look. Tell me what happened. At first, Lucas hesitated. But the words spilled out anyway. They don't get it, Mom. Every time I try, they just laugh. Today, I was only trying to explain probability with cards. I thought maybe it would help. But the teacher told me off. And everyone laughed again. It's always like that. I can't just be a normal student. His mother's eyes softened. She reached across the table, holding his small hands in hers. Lucas, you are normal. You're just different. And different doesn't mean less. It means you see the world in a way others can't. Lucas shook his head. No one gives me a chance. Not at school, not anywhere. Sometimes, I wonder why you and Dad even chose me. Silence filled the kitchen for a long moment. Then his mom took a deep breath. Lucas, do you remember the day we first met you? He looked up, puzzled. She smiled faintly. At the adoption center, before they brought you into the room, the nurse pulled us aside. She told us you had dwarfism. She warned us that it might mean more doctor visits, more challenges, more stares from people who don't understand. And she even asked if we wanted more time to reconsider our decision. Lucas swallowed hard. And, did you? His mom squeezed his hands tighter. Not for 1 second. The moment they placed you in our arms, we knew. We knew you were meant to be ours. Different, yes, but ours. And we celebrated that day like it was the best day of our lives, because it was. Lucas's throat tightened. For the first time all week, he felt tears prick his eyes. Not from sadness, but from something else. His mom continued softly. I know the world can be unkind, but don't you ever doubt that you belong here. You are strong, Lucas, and you're not alone. Lucas sniffled, wiping his eyes quickly. Thanks, Mom. For the first time that day he managed a small smile. A fragile smile, but a real one. The next day at school, Lucas overheard a group of students buzzing with excitement. Posters for the biggest party of the semester had been plastered all over the halls. For Lucas, parties were the kind of thing he only dreamed about. He'd never been invited before. He tried to brush it off, but part of him wondered, what if this time was different? During lunch, he gathered his courage and walked over to a group of boys he sometimes worked with in class. Hey, are you guys going to the party this weekend? He asked quietly. One of them smirked. Yeah, why? You thinking of showing up? Another chimed in, laughing. What's he gonna do there? Hide in the snack bowl? Or maybe he can be the entertainment. Like a party trick. The table erupted in laughter. Lucas felt his cheeks burn. He forced a smile, trying to play it off, but the sting cut deep. Then, just when he thought it couldn't get worse, one of the cheerleaders walked by. She stopped, glanced down at Lucas, and sneered. Ah, maybe you can be our mascot. You'd fit right in the costume. Her friends giggled and kept walking. Lucas stood frozen, tray trembling in his hands. Around him, people whispered, some laughing, some just staring. He wanted to disappear. Finally, he muttered, forget it, and walked away, dumping his untouched lunch in the trash. As he slipped into the bathroom, locking himself in a stall, his chest tightened. The voices of the bullies echoed in his head like cruel recordings. Mascot, party trick, leprechaun. He pressed his hands against his ears, trying to block them out. But they didn't fade. For the rest of the day, Lucas stayed quiet, barely speaking in class, avoiding everyone's eyes. By the time the final bell rang, his hope of fitting in had been crushed all over again. That evening, Lucas sat on his bed, staring at the floor. His adoptive sister, Ella, peeked into the room. Hey, you okay? She asked gently. Lucas shrugged. Doesn't matter. Ella stepped in anyway, holding a small bag of chips. She sat beside him and nudged his shoulder. Want some? Lucas shook his head. Not hungry. They sat in silence for a moment before Lucas whispered, Why does everyone hate me? Ella frowned. They don't hate you. Yes, they do, Lucas said quickly. They laugh at me. They whisper about me. They act like I'm some freak. I just want to be normal, Ella. Just once. His sister's eyes softened. She handed him the chips anyway. You are normal. Just a different kind of normal. And honestly, I think you're way braver than anyone else at that school. Lucas glanced at her, doubtful.
Ella smiled.
Seriously, you keep showing up every day, even when people are cruel. You don't quit. That takes guts. More guts than those bullies will ever have. Lucas blinked. No one had ever put it that way before. His sister leaned her head on his shoulder. One day they're gonna see it too. Trust me. For the first time that week, Lucas let out a tiny laugh. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. The next day in math class, the teacher sighed in frustration. All right, everyone, probability is on the test. If you don't master it, you're going to fail. Now let's work in pairs. Students groaned. Desks shifted. People quickly partnered up with their friends. Within seconds, Lucas found himself alone. Again, he raised his hand quietly. I don't have a partner. The teacher glanced around. Nobody volunteered. Most avoided eye contact. Finally, the teacher sighed and said, "Fine. Just join Ben's group." Ben, the same boy who laughed at him during lunch, rolled his eyes. Great. Now we're doomed. Lucas sat down anyway, determined to ignore the sting. The teacher wrote a problem on the board. If you draw 2 red marbles from a bag of 30, what's the probability? Ben groaned. Ugh. This makes no sense. Lucas hesitated, then pulled a deck of old playing cards from his backpack. Here, maybe this will help. Ben frowned. What, you're gonna do magic tricks now? Lucas shook his head.
No.
Look, there are 26 red cards in the deck. If you draw 1, that's 26 out of 52. But then 1's gone, so it becomes 25 out of 51. That's how probability works.
Ben blinked.
His eyes widened a little. Wait. That actually makes sense. Lucas continued, shuffling the cards, letting Ben pull them out to see. For the first time, Ben leaned in with genuine interest. Across the room, another student noticed. Hey, what's he showing you? Soon, 2 more students wandered over. Then 3. Within minutes, a small group had gathered around Lucas's desk, watching him explain probability using the cards. The teacher raised an eyebrow but said nothing. For once, Lucas wasn't the quiet kid in the back. He was the center of attention, but in the best possible way. When class ended, Ben slipped the cards back into Lucas's hands. Thanks, man. You actually made that easy. Lucas's chest warmed. Just one moment, but it felt like everything had changed. By the end of the week, the whispers in the hallway sounded different. Hey, that's the kid who explained probability with cards. Dude, he's actually smart. I finally passed my quiz thanks to him. Lucas couldn't believe it. For the first time since he arrived at the school, people weren't laughing at him. They were asking for his help. One afternoon, a girl from his history class nervously approached him. Lucas? Could you maybe help me with my notes? I never get the main points right. Lucas blinked, surprised, but nodded. Sure, let's try it. They sat under a tree after school, and Lucas explained history like a story, with characters, drama, and cliffhangers. By the time they finished, the girl was grinning. Wow, that actually made sense. And just like that, more students began asking. One by one, Lucas became the go-to helper, not the easy target. A few weeks later, the teachers gathered in the staff room with grim faces. The school's test scores had been plummeting for years. If our students fail the upcoming standardized exams, one teacher muttered, we could lose funding. We could even lose our jobs. Meanwhile, students in the hallways groaned about the endless drills and worksheets. Nobody was motivated. Nobody cared. But then, one teacher spoke up. What if we tried something different? What if we let Lucas show us his method? First, the idea was laughed off. A boy with dwarfism, the same student they once thought couldn't even keep up, teaching the entire school? Sounded absurd. But desperation makes people listen. And so, Lucas was invited to share his unique approach. Standing nervously at the front of the gym, Lucas felt his hands tremble. Hundreds of eyes were on him. He whispered to himself, one step at a time, just one step. Then he began. He used cards to explain probability, apples and oranges to explain biology, shells and stones to explain resilience in literature. The gym, once noisy and chaotic, grew silent. Students leaned in captivated. Teachers exchanged shocked glances. For the first time, everyone wasn't just hearing the lesson, they were understanding it. By the end of the session, the gym erupted into applause. Lucas's cheeks burned, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was pride. Months later, the test results came back. The school's scores were the highest in its history. Funding was saved. Teachers kept their jobs. Students who once hated learning actually started to believe they could succeed. And at the center of it all was Lucas. On the night of his gotcha day, the anniversary of when his adoptive parents chose him, Lucas sat at home, doubting anyone would come to celebrate. "Mom, maybe we should cancel," he muttered. "I don't really have friends." But then the doorbell rang. One by one, his classmates poured in. Ben, the girl from history class, even kids who once bullied him. They carried snacks, gifts, and smiles. "Happy gotcha day, Lucas," they cheered. Lucas's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he didn't feel like the outsider. He felt like he belonged. Later that night, as Lucas blew out his candles, he didn't wish for new shoes, or popularity, or even for the bullies to stop. He realized his wish had already come true, because Lucas had shown the world, and himself, that being different wasn't a weakness. It was his greatest strength. No matter what challenges you face, no matter how others see you, remember this. Your uniqueness is your superpower. Lucas was once judged for what he couldn't do, but in the end, it was exactly who he was that changed everything. What about you? Where are you watching this from? And what did you take away from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you believe more people should hear stories like Lucas's, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.